So yesterday, this is where we ended on our notes. We were just getting into the actual contents of cells. And as I said yesterday, it should be a pretty good review from what we covered when you guys were in biology. So first thing we started talking about was cytoplasm, which we usually refer to cytoplasm as being the jelly-like substance inside of the cell. It's not just the jelly-like substance, it is everything that is inside of the cell. So the cytosol is actually that fluid, that jelly-like substance. And then you have things like inclusions and organelles that are also present there. Inclusions are any chemical substances like nutrients that are floating around in the cytosol. And then your organelles, which is what we're going to talk about next, that perform all of the functions for the cell, are part of the cytoplasm. So, and your membrane-bound organelles allow for compartmentalization, which means that a cell can do several different functions at the same time. So this is just a nice little illustration of the cell showing all these different things. This is on page 68 in your books. So you might, I don't know, have it open to that page. So as we go through the different organelles, you can look at the picture as well. So first one is the mitochondria. What do we know about the mitochondria? Nothing. Thank you. A plus. It is the powerhouse of the cell because it does what? What's the function of the mitochondria? You guys should all know this because how much time did we spend on cellular respiration when you were in biology? Too much, right? So mitochondria is where cellular respiration takes place, which means it is producing the ATP, which is the energy that our cells use. It's a molecule of energy. So, mitochondria is a double membraned organelle. Has an inner membrane and an outer membrane. On that inner membrane is where the reactions, the cellular respiration reactions take place, in which it helps to break down sugar and convert it into ATP. Again, ATP is the energy molecule that our cells need in order to be able to function. Okay. Ribosomes are essential in the protein synthesis process. It's where the proteins get assembled at. So ribosomes are made up of protein and ribosomal RNA, or rRNA. And we find them in a couple different locations in the cell. They can be free floating in the cytoplasm, but then they can also be attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, in which then we call that the rough ER, as opposed to the smooth ER that does not have ribosomes attached to it. Next organelle is the endoplasmic reticulum. You can call it the ER. So these are fluid-filled tunnels or canals that carry substances within the cell. And it is continuous with the nuclear membrane. As you can see, if you look at the picture on page 68, it is surrounding the nucleus. And it is also attached to it in a way so that some of the contents of the nucleus can leave and enter into the ER for the purpose of creating proteins. Two types of ER. We have the rough ER, which we just talked about with the ribosomes. So called that because it is studded with ribosomes, meaning that there are ribosomes attached to the membrane of it. And so you have the synthesis of proteins in the rough ER, which it's making proteins is all that's saying. It can also be used as a transport vesicle to move proteins within the cell. And you will find a very large endoplasmic reticulum or many endoplasmic reticulums in cells that are specifically functioning to make proteins. Then you have your smooth ER, which it is called that because it does not have any ribosomes on it. And its function is to break down lipids, which lipids are fats. So functions in lipid metabolism, meaning it functions in breaking down fats. Also is a location where drugs and pesticides can be detoxified. This picture is in your guys' books on page 69. It is showing the synthesis and export of proteins in the rough ER. And it just takes you through step by step what is happening. So protein synthesized on the ribosome migrates into the rough ER tunnel system. In the tunnel, the protein will fold into its functional shape. Sugar chains can be attached to it. So it's processing it, getting it ready to do its job. Protein then gets packaged into tiny membranous sac called a transport vesicle. And then that transport vesicle basically takes it to wherever it needs to go. One way to remember what a vesicle is the fact that it is one letter off from being vehicle. So it transports things like a vehicle does. Okay, our next organelle is our Golgi apparatus. It used to be called a Golgi body. They changed the name to it to apparatus. Not quite sure why, but there is on page 70, there is an illustration there that shows what the function of the Golgi apparatus is. If you wanted to look at that, it will come up on the next slide though. So Golgi apparatus, kind of very reminiscent of the endoplasmic reticulum. In our book, like, it has these organelles as different colors, but if you were to actually look at it under a microscope, it's not nearly as easy to tell those things apart from each other than maybe where its location is. So sometimes it's very, very close to your endoplasmic reticulum because it works with it. So proteins can go to the Golgi apparatus, and it can modify and then package those proteins and then send them off to where they need to go. Looking at that picture on page 70, you can see 3 different pathways there of how a Golgi apparatus will package those proteins or those substances for different functions. So pathway 1 is showing a secretory vesicle, meaning that it's going to go and fuse with the plasma membrane, and it's going to excrete those whatever is in the vesicle. So that is outside of the cell. So whatever's in it, it might be proteins, it might be enzymes, it might be hormones that get produced that need to be sent to some other location in the body. So it gets expelled from the cell, where it eventually ends up in the bloodstream probably, and gets transported to where it is needed. Pathway 2 is showing in-house proteins and lipids, so the transport of those to the different parts of the cell. And then pathway 3 is showing lysosomes, which are a specific type of enzyme that are used to break down substances within the cell. So you get worn out parts of the cell that need to be broken down and recycled so they don't just accumulate in the cell. And that's what the lysosome is going to do. It's going to help break that down and recycle the parts, which I think is on our next slide of notes. But so pathway 1, excreting those, and this says proteins, but it could be a number of different things. Pathway 2 showing how it is transporting different things into or out of the cell. And here are our lysosomes that can help to break down different substances. Oops. So lysosomes are membranous bags that contain digestive enzymes. It's in a vesicle, just like we showed on that last slide there. And as I said, they digest worn out and non-usable cell structures. And sometimes they will have phagocytes within them, which help to, again, break down stuff, but it has a lot to do with bacteria, helps to break down bacteria that enters into our cells. Something very similar to lysosomes are something called peroxisomes. And these contain oxidase enzymes. So lysosomes contain enzymes. These also contain enzymes. But these ones will help to break down harmful substances that have entered into your body, into your cells, such as alcohol and formaldehyde. It detoxifies those. And we'll also break down free radicals, which are highly reactive chemicals. You don't want them reacting with things in your body, so it breaks them down. Those free radicals get converted into hydrogen peroxide, which is harmful to your bodies. So then it breaks it down into water. Why is hydrogen peroxide harmful? What does it do? You ever put it on a cut?
It hurts.
It hurts. Why does it hurt?
It's like getting rid of like the infection.
It is. So if you have an infection, it is going to break down any bacteria or anything that you have in that cut. But it's not like it can't pick and choose what living things it destroys. So not only does it destroy that bacteria, but it destroys your living cells as well. That's why it hurts, because it starts, like, put it on your skin, it will break the cell open, basically killing it. So then you feel it as pain. But hydrogen peroxide is really good, though, for getting out blood stains on clothing. Because it will break the actual blood cells that are there. It will break them down. And these replicate by pinching in half or budding from the ER. Something that you probably haven't really heard of when we talk about things that are inside of the cell would be something called a cytoskeleton. And just like the skeleton that is in our bodies, it provides us some structure and allows for movement. The cytoskeleton also does that for the cell. So it is a network of protein structures, extends throughout the entire cytoplasm, and it provides an internal framework so that it's not just a blob. A lot of times people think of cells as just being blobs. Yes and no. They do have structure to them. Like, they have a function, they also have some structure to them. So that makes it so it's not just a blob. Gives the cell the shape that it needs in order to be able to function. Okay. Helps to support and anchor the organelles, keep them in the location where they can function their best. And then provides machinery for intercellular transport. Think of it as kind of like a subway system for different substances that move around the cell. So you have this skeletal structure inside, which you're not going to be able to see if you look through a microscope, but it has this structure inside which can help to move substances, kind of like a subway or a train system. And these, the cytoskeleton is made up of 3 different filaments. We have microfilaments, intermediate filaments, and microtubules. And you might write on there as well that the microfilaments are the largest and microtubules are the smallest. And then intermediate is somewhere in between. There is a picture of these. Oh, I think I wrote that wrong. Microfilaments are the smallest. I think that must be why I erased it off of here, because it used to be on the slide. Because if you look at page 71, top of that page there, it has an illustration of what they actually look like, and then an actual microscopic picture of each of these. So the microfilaments, 7 nanometers, intermediate about 10 nanometers, and microtubules about 25. So microfilaments are the smallest, and microtubules would be the largest. I think that's why I don't have that on there anymore, because it was backwards. So, again, picture that is in your book showing the difference in them. Have we talked about centrioles before? I feel like we have, because it's part of the cell division process. So may or may not remember this. So rod-shaped bodies made of 9 triplets of microtubules. And they will generate microtubules. So they're made of microtubules. We'll generate them. In order to connect to the chromosomes during the cell division process. Remember, like when we talked about that, you have the centrioles here, and then you have your chromosomes that line up in the middle, and they get pulled to the opposite side. You remember? You remember that? So these things here, these are your centrioles. They create those spindle fibers that come out, attach to the chromosomes to pull them apart to each separate side of the cell. The next series of slides here are showing the information that is in table 3.1, which is on page 72 and 73. So it tells you what the structure is and what their function is. We don't need to know, I don't feel like we need to know very in depth this information. We need to know like what the structure is and then what it does. We don't like, there's way more information here than what you actually need to know. Okay, so, but it is a good thing to, it's a good reference for some of the work we have to do yet. Okay. Okay, few more structures that have to do with cells but are not necessarily a part of every cell, like the other things we just talked about, are these cell extensions. So these are things that are found on the surface of some cells depending on what their function is. So cilia will move materials across a cell surface, and it is, we can find some of these cells with cilia on them located in the respiratory system, and it helps to move mucus through that system. So basically you have a cell like this, and it has all these little tiny projections that look like this. Okay, little tiny finger-like extensions that extend at the surface of the cell. So it's not on every surface, it's just on that free surface. That one looks terrible. That's why I'm not an art teacher, you guys. So, and like I said, it helps to move mucus across the surface there. We can also have cells that have a flagella, which helps to propel the cell. The only one that is found in the human body is for the sperm cell. So it helps the sperm cell swim to the egg where it can fertilize it. And then there are also microvilli, which are tiny finger-like extensions of the plasma membrane. And basically it's like tinier version of the cilia. And it helps to increase surface area. And these are used for absorption, where the cilia is used to move a substance across the membrane. So you would find microvilli in like your digestive system, increase the amount of surface area in which the nutrients that we need can be absorbed. So, flagellated cell there. Okay, you ready to switch gears a little bit? That's just talking about like our cells and those structures inside of it. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the different functions that cells can have. So all cells are going to have those basic things we just talked about, minus the surface extensions. But they can serve a lot of different functions, different types of cells for different functions that they have. So human body has over 200 different types of cells. And they can vary in size, shape, and function. So they can vary in length from 1/12,000th of an inch to over 1 yard. Nerve cells. Who do you think has the longest nerve cells in here? So that says 1 yard, and that's about the same length as 1 meter. There's about a 3-inch difference between a yard and a meter. So you have a cell that can be that long in your body. How does that work? Probably not folded up. What's a nerve cell look like? Pretty sure I had one of these drawn on my board almost all of last year. Yeah, it's a nerve cell. So this is the body of it, and it's got projections that come off of it also. So this is what sends signals to and from our brain in order for our body to function properly, to get those signals from inside of the body and from the external environment. You have all those receptors that are found all throughout your body. Well, this is one of the cells that helps to send that message to your brain, and then from your brain with the response through that feedback system that we have. So, depending on, how tall you are, you could have nerve cells that are longer than this. It's like, that's takes up almost my entire body, but if those two stood up, they probably have longer nerve cells than what I do, right? And as we talked about in the last chapter, the structure, when we talk about anatomy and physiology, the structure is going to determine the function of the different parts of the body. And that is true when it comes to cells as well. So cells have a specific shape, and so that ensures that they can do a specific function, like the nerve cells. If nerve cells weren't long, they didn't have this really long tail that helps to send signals, what do you think would happen with our responses within our body? Might be limited and might take longer, right? that had to go through several cells rather than just one cell. Like if I needed to tell Elena a message, but we had to go through every person in this room before Elena could get the message, rather than me just telling Elena the message, which one's going to take longer?
Let's try it.
Play the telephone game?
Yeah.
Maybe at the end of the period. So if there are many cells that the message has to go through, it might take a little bit longer, and the message might be screwed up by the time we get to the target cell, right? So they all have a specific shape in order to be able to function. And on page 75, there is some illustrations there of different types of cells and what their function are. So the different shapes of them for the different functions that they have. So first function we're going to talk about is cells that connect parts, body parts. So things like fibroblasts will secrete cable-like fibers that can grab on to different parts and help to hold things together. But by connecting body parts, we don't necessarily mean that they are just stuck in one place, because then we have the erythrocyte, which is a red blood cell that carries oxygen as well as nutrients in the bloodstream to the different parts of the body. So it's connecting one part of the body to another, but it's not like when we say connected, like they are locked in place with each other. So here we have, like I said, our fibroblasts that have these little things that come out, connect different things, and allows it to connect to other things, helps with the structure a lot of times with stuff. And then our red blood cells there that connect our body by carrying different things from one place in the body to another. Cells that cover and line body organs, our epithelial cells will do this for us, and the way that they are structured together, so not just the structure of one epithelial cell itself, but the way they are held together allows it to be able to cover our body as a whole, but then also line our body organs, because they are basically like sheets of cells. And then things like fibroblasts are able to help hold them together. But also looking at, if we go back to our cell membrane junctions, tight junctions, desmosomes, gap junctions, help to hold those together to protect against wear and tear, because our skin undergoes a lot of wear and tear on a daily basis, right? So you could see how, so very, very small thing that is shown here, but you'd see how that could form a large sheet of those cells. Cells that move organs and body parts. So skeletal muscles for sure are in that, because we wouldn't be able to move without those skeletal muscles.